All right, for everyone who is just now joining, we're going to give it just a couple of minutes for people to kind of file in. So we'll get started in a minute or two here. For all of you just joining, we're just going to give it a minute for people to still join, and then we'll kick off. All right, I think some people will still may join a little late, but I want to be cautious of everyone's time so we can get started. So just so everyone knows, there is a Q&A functionality and chat. Please feel free to put your questions there. And as we go, we kind of want to make this really interactive. So please use that functionality. You can also raise your hand. That way we can allow you to speak and ask a question that way. And then this is also recorded. So if for some reason you're not able to sit through the whole thing, we'll be sharing how to watch this later in your own time. But we'll go ahead and get started. So David, I always like to kick off and ask our speakers to introduce themselves and give us a little bit of background.
Sure. So, hi everybody. David Nour. Let's see. I live here in Atlanta. I run a boutique advisory firm focused on 3 areas: driving profitable growth, really creating and sustaining a culture of innovation, and making real change last. Originally from Iran, I came to U.S. in 1981 with a suitcase, $100, didn't know anybody, and didn't speak a word of English. I came here to finish high school and started in Georgia Tech in engineering, and in Georgia State, and Emory for grad school. My career, 3 phases. Phase 1 was technology, IBM, Silicon Graphics, Business Objects, consulting. Phase 2, after Emory for grad school, I became president of a startup in New York, and I spent a number of years with Pequot Capital, $14 billion under management. And we bought and sold 110 different companies, so private equity, entrepreneur in residence. And then for the last 18 years, I've been on my own. So started a firm, boutique firm, doing advisory work. I've been blessed to write 10 books. I'm working on book number 11. And my clients range from Siemens and Disney and KPMG and Humana, and more recently Delta Airlines, to coaching several executives, I'm an adjunct faculty at Emory and Vanderbilt as well. You're muted, Kyla.
Sorry about that.
That's all right. By the way, you're muted is the new people hitting their horn right behind you on the red light, right? You're muted.
It does feel that way. So this conversation is about leading through crisis.
Yep.
So I don't know. I mean, I personally, when 9/11 happened, I was younger, and when the financial crisis happened, I was younger. So I think in my adulthood, this has been the first time something like this has kind of happened. In those moments, and in this moment, how do you think about crisis and moving forward and getting through it, especially as a leader, whether it's leading a team at work or, being a CEO of a company.
Sure. So you're right. A lot of millennials have not been through this type of downturn. Most of us have never seen anything like this. And people tend to revert back to what they understand. This is unfortunately, and I was president of a company in, '01, and, we saw the dot-bomb crash and '08 with the recession. And some people even refer to war. If you think of World War II, it was one half the world fighting the other half the world. There's never been a scenario where the entire world is fighting a single enemy. So I've had 54 conversations with senior executives in the last month. Kyla, the first 30 days really was a shock to their system, right? First, it was a supply shock of just not being able to get and concerned about their supply chains, if you will. And once that passed kind of China and moved over to Europe, and that, and of course the supply chain worry shifts for a lot of international clients that way, then it became the demand shock, right? So without real-time data as to what the clients are thinking, how they're deciding, more importantly, their timing, now you don't know what your pipeline looks like. You don't know what your business looks like. So the natural tendency without information is for people to put on the brakes. And when you put on the brakes, a lot of people describe our economy as an engine. I would submit it's a much more tightly integrated ecosystem like the Amazon. Think of the Amazon jungles. Because when immediately companies put non-essential travel on hold, right? Look at the ripple effect, right? Again, I started working with Delta Airlines this past January. It seemed like overnight, their flights just fell off a cliff, right? So we're not going to do non-essential travel. Great. We're not going to do elective surgeries. If you think about a hospital, if you know anything about a health system, they don't make money on treating COVID patients. They make money on the more complex, complicated, a lot of times potentially elective surgeries. And if we just suddenly put the money on, put the hold on those kinds of things, there's actually health systems that are laying off healthcare workers. So every decision a leader makes often has a ripple effect and often has unintended consequences. So it's initially paralysis, and a lot of it was initially a lot of these executives I spoke with never believed a perception of a market in Wuhan, China would shut down the global economy, right? So a lot of people kind of brushed it off, and this too will pass. And every conversation I'm having with almost every senior executive now believes this is here to stay. And it's here to stay, and at the risk of never being invited back. And I'm not a doomsayer type, but this is here to stay for, we believe, at least the next 12 to 18 months. And let me just plant this seed with you and the audience, and I'd welcome their comments as well. Even if we had, I'm a big believer of get your data from credible sources and then discern for yourself, right? So I was on a call with the chairman of the Global Vaccine Alliance. This is a $10 billion global vaccine organization, and their whole mission is to distribute vaccines globally. So their comment was, even if we had a vaccine today, so even with a biosolution today, which by the way, most believe is at least 12 months away, right? Even if you have one today, A, it's going to take some time to deploy it. B, our psyche, our human psyche is not going to be that excited about businesses whose business model is predicated on physical proximity. So restaurants, theaters, bowling alleys. Are you kidding me? We're going to see all those things as petri dishes. I didn't like a middle seat of a plane to begin with. I'm certainly not going back now, right? So it's going to take some time for us to feel comfortable getting back onto those environments. One, two, I talked to a vice president of engineering for a firm who has 1,200 engineers working now from home. Their productivity is at 90%. The highest they were ever able to capture in the office was in the 70s. So his next call to his CFO was, why would he ever go back to an office again?
Yeah.
And when I spoke to him, he says, think about it. We're not spending 90 minutes commuting. People are working in t-shirt and shorts. They're up early, middle of the day. A lot of times they're taking care of their kids because we've all become instant teachers and IT tech support and experimental chefs, right? But you know what? They're coming back online and they're working again later in the day. So for a long time, we've all been struggling with this work-life balance. I think COVID-19 has helped us create work-life blending and really to think differently about our priorities and challenge a lot of our assumptions around things like the environment, around things like education. My kids used to go to school from 7 in the mornings when I left the house, and they would come home 4 in the afternoon. Now their classes are 9 to noon. And guess what? We have lunch together as a family. We have breakfast together. We're going back to board games. I don't remember the last time we played board games, right?
Right.
But, last time we played Battleship. How fun was that? And I'm still working a ton, and I feel I'm really productive during the day. It's different kind of productivity. So I think it's a combination of initial shock, initial paralysis. Now it's, okay, if this thing is not going to just blow over, how do we adapt? How do we maneuver? How do we recalibrate? And what I get really excited about are leaders who are thinking, how do we reinvent, if not reimagine, parts of our business? So things that were sitting on a shelf and may have been a luxury a month ago just became a necessity. And now we're thinking, okay, if our business is predicated on physically getting in front of people and seeing people, how do we pivot? How do we create? And I just don't think you can take what you were doing online. I think we're going to have to think differently about how do we create engagement and influence people online.
Yeah. So that actually leads into my next question. And I just want to remind everyone, if you join a little later, to please jump in and ask questions if you have any in the Q&A or chat. Also raise your hand. We can let you kind of ask your question live. But that was a good segue into, we talk a lot about pivoting and transition. And you just mentioned it. Now we have to rethink the way that we are basically doing life. What are some practical ways with some of the people that you've been working with that you're seeing them pivot and transition?
Yeah. So you're, I use the analogy of, if you've ever been kids and playing dodgeball, when that ball was coming at us, very few people just stood still, right? So you gotta be flexible enough to pivot. And if your mindset is, I'm gonna wait till it's perfect, you're going to miss the window of opportunity. You're going to miss the boat here. You got to, a lot of entrepreneurs, I love this. A lot of startups believe if you're not embarrassed by what you put out in the market, you've waited too long. Yep. So we've got to get much more agile. So speed and agility matters more than ever before. And especially I talk to a lot of mature leaders of mature companies and mature industries. If you've got to go get things approved by a committee and it's going to take us 75 conversations to move from A to B, it's going to be an uphill battle because, again, this market demands much more speed and agility from us, number one. Number two, your ability to maneuver, pivot, heavily depends on three things. Number one, your financial position, right? If you have a strong balance sheet as a leader, if I've got a big savings account, it's a lot easier for me to go try different things, right? So, and that's also never a switch, it's a dial or a spectrum. How much maneuverability depends on my balance sheet, my financial position. Number two, I would submit it heavily depends on your talent. A friend of mine, Eric McCarthy, calls it labor flex. If you have talent, let me use an example of a restaurant, right? So nobody's coming into our restaurant. I don't need waiters. I don't need busboys. What I do need is I need to be able to retrain them to maybe now help us create meal kits or deliver or man a pickup window, right? That's a different skill, not that different, but you got to be able to flex your labor to do things that the market needs, not maybe what you hired them for or what you asked them to do. And again, present company excluded, a lot of millennials struggle with that. Wait. I was hired as a marketing person. Now you ask me to go sell, or wait, I was hired to do this job and you asked me to go do something else. So you got to be flexible if you want to remain relevant, right? The third one, and probably the most critical one, is a really candid understanding of what are your core capabilities, right? What are your core competencies? What is it that you do exceptionally well? And can we find ways to pivot that? Now, again, let me just use myself as an example, then I want to show your audience a couple of examples as well. So I had 4 buckets: speaking. So I would speak 50, 60 times a year at company meetings, annual conferences, those kinds of things. Education. So my Vanderbilt and Emory kind of education, executive education programs, but also inside companies. Coaching, where I coach executives. And the last one is consulting, this idea of helping them grow, right? I was on the road 208 days last year, right? So a lot of my work was getting on a plane. Some people get in a car to go to work. I would get on a plane to go to work. And I'm convinced Jesus had no followers in Bethlehem either, because you're never a hero in your own hometown, right? I just can't be that good if I live here in Atlanta, right? So a lot of my clients are New York and Chicago and LA and international a good bit. So when this thing hit, and I initially had several people cancel our speaking engagements, right? We're going to cancel this conference. We're just not going to do it.
Right.
And that was understandable. Several others postponed, which is okay. What got really interesting was the ones that saw were not really going to be able to cancel, were not going to be able to postpone. What other options do we have? So Vanderbilt is a good example. We had scheduled a 2-day executive education program, and it's what I teach is highly immersive. It's hands-on. I bring a creative director with us, and we teach people how to visually articulate, draw their strategy. So it's called strategy visualization. And the whole time we're thinking, okay, how are we going to do this if we can't deliver this in person? And again, you can't just say, I'm going to deliver this 2-day class online, because nobody's going to want to sit there for 2 days looking at a screen. That's just not viable.
Right.
So we spent literally a month rebuilding this 2-day program into these 30 to 45-minute learning sprints. And Kayla, what's cool about it is you incorporate exercises, but also I gave people time to get up and stretch and bio break and go get a drink, and right. But also we used Zoom. We used the breakout rooms. So I told them, you're going to learn as much from me in our general session as you are in small group conversations. And the breakout rooms were fabulous because we gave them an exercise. I created material that we shared on a shared cloud folder in advance. So they had an exercise to do. I used a random automatic selector. So different people were in different breakout rooms each time. They got to know each other. The point is, people who were very reluctant, and I may have been one of them, of how are we going to do this virtually when we've always done it in person, learned that with a good amount of preparation, and it's a ton of work, good amount of preparation, using the right digital collaboration tools, and bringing people who are willing to be those test pilots, willing to do this with you,
Right.
I think it might surprise you in your ability to pivot. So that's just one example from my world. Others I've seen, I've got clients who are putting on virtual conferences and virtual trade shows. I've got people that are, instead of, again, in the training space or development, instead of a full day class, we're testing a lot of different half day, 90-minute sessions several times a day. I hired a couple of students, and we researched 65 different collaboration tools, and I wrote a blog post about it. So there's now digital whiteboards. There are things where you and I could draw the same thing and from 2 different sides, almost like a Google Doc, Google, Present, kind of a collaborative environment like that. So there are a lot of tools that I think are going to help us think differently about our capabilities and our competency, and how do I dispense with some of the lesser value add stuff and really focus on the higher value add, where that recipient of the value is going to be better off for it.
Right. all good takeaways. I know you said you wanted to show our audience something. So do you
Yeah.
want
Yeah. So let me show, I'm going to share my screen. And I want to reiterate, I welcome the audience to ask as well of, you know, questions or comments or things that come up. So for years we've been, let me bring up an example. For years, we've had this service that we've been delivering called strategy visualization, right? This is, I literally have a creative director, and for global clients, part of our advisory work is this is what we do, right? We go in and we understand where they are. Their future state has got to be a little different. We help them build prototypes and then launch whatever that initiative is and then roll it out, right? And we're always asking, why are you trying to do this? Who's the audience we're trying to engage? What do you want people to think, feel, do differently? What's your story? So we create a visual story. And then how do we help you scale this and sustain it over a period of time? These types of projects, you know, 30 to 45 days to kind of get out of the gate. And as you can see, they're refined, right? So the more executives I spoke with, the more I found out that they're having daily huddles where they're trying to get everybody on the same page, right? What are we focused on? What should we be doing? What are the priorities of today? So the more we talked about it, the more we said, okay, what if they had something that was less refined, but it still was visual and it created alignment? So we came up with Agile Alignment, and I just wrote a Forbes article about it today. That so I talked to one executive, and let me just set the stage for this one. He said, we have a building, about 2,000 people come into our building every day. I'm looking out my window, and I see about 5 cars parked there. So his whole thing was, we've got to create an environment where people feel safe coming back to work. So as we started to talk through this, systems thinking was what came to mind. And I said, COVID is really tackling a lot of different challenges. What if we came up with a more holistic view? And some of it may be an overkill, but if this thing really does persist, maybe it's not an overkill. So we started doing some research. We found out that South Korea is not only they've been able to flatten the curve, but they now use some really interesting techniques that, again, may object to our sense of privacy and security. But when we're talking about global pandemic, you know, some of this stuff may have to subside, right? So for example, they have a health tent. Number one, they have a health tent at the entrance of your building, and they test you. If you're sick, even a common cold, you're going back home. Go home for 4 days. We'll have a health clinic that checks in with you, and we gauge your progress that way. If you're healthy, you get to come to the parking deck. By the way, we no longer need lobbies, right? We don't need visitors. We don't need lobbies. One of my clients have already started doing this. They cleared the lobby, and they talked to, this was fascinating. They went and spoke with those silicon fab plants that have to have clean rooms, right? They talked to them about how they're doing their environments, and they figured out that they can turn that lobby in number 2 into an airlock entrance where UV lighting and other sanitation tools sanitize anybody that comes in. As they come in, there's wearable technology. So Samsung is one of my clients. They're already working on an app on their watches that, number 1, measures your core temp. Number 2, your movements throughout the facility, as well as it will alert you if somebody's within 6 feet away. So now you have wearable technology.
Yeah.
The iRobot Roomba, right? That can move around the hallways and clean bathrooms. And so if you deploy those, number 4, I don't want to touch another knob. I don't want to touch another door. I don't want to, right? So what if we had more hands-free motion sensing, right? Thanks to open doors and open access and those kinds of things. And then moving our physical spaces at least 6 feet away, our desks, where we eat, just kind of how we work throughout the day. So people feel that sense of, that's my personal space. I don't know if you've been to a grocery store lately, but people literally avoid each other in the aisles because we're trying to be respectful and keep that distance, right? I think that's going to continue. And people, by the way, leave through the same airlock as they leave. So this isn't intended to be an end-to-end, but it does a couple of things. 1, agility, right? We turn these around for clients within an hour. Number two, alignment. Get everybody on the same page on what our priorities are. Number three, communicate it visually. One of the things that we found out was, and there's actually some neuroscience and MRI data that shows this, our brains process visuals 60,000 times faster than we do text.
Wow.
So I can look at something visually and quickly get it versus me having to read paragraphs and pages on it. So this is an example of a service that we created out of a core competency, out of our background in doing this kind of work. But you know what? It's quick, it's dirty, it's, move, agility, alignment, communicate visually, get the point across.
Right.
Makes sense? Does this resonate?
Oh yeah, for sure.
So then, yeah, so we took the same idea and I talked to a CEO of a restaurant company. And your heart goes out to this guy because, as you can imagine, and as your audience can imagine, their business is down by 95%, right? So nobody's coming in, and they've got 30, 40 of these restaurants. Nobody's coming in. They are still doing pickup and delivery, but that's it. And he said that doesn't begin to cover an ounce of his expenses, much less, and it's not sustainable. So again, the more we talked, the more I said, what if, and some people are starting to do this, what if you went to a kitchen-only concept? So again, follow me along. Number one, if nobody's coming in for the seating, I don't need all that seating space, right? Let's move those out of the way. Let's expand the kitchen with more cold storage and prep areas. Number two, we talked about this a little bit. Let's reskill the staff to become logistics, delivery ops. Let's reconfigure the parking lot. Nobody's coming to the parking lot, right? Let's reconfigure the parking lot for a drive-through. Right? Let's get a drive-through going.
Mm-hmm.
The top 10 menu items, right? We all have favorite restaurants, right? What if they turned those into these fresh meal kits? So I talked to a chef friend and he said, any really good chef absolutely can create meal kits.
Yeah.
But don't just send me the meal kits. What if on number 5, you got your chef, your sous chef, basically your culinary expertise, not as promotional, because most of them are doing Instagram and Facebook, and bartenders are doing cute stuff, but that's really for marketing. What if we created a membership program, right? YouTube channel, but a membership site that we taught you how to make those fresh meal kits. And by the way, not just me, right? My wife and I are a little more competent, and you may not remember this, but when we were all kids, I'm dating myself, we used to have a class in school called home economics. We literally were taught how to sew and iron and cook. And like this was a class in school. Well, we got away from that. What if these chefs taught our kids, especially teenagers, especially high schoolers, maybe some of the college kids who are home, back living with mom and dad. They taught our kids how to make some of these, how to cook, right? And then number 6, respond to what the market needs. So maybe extended hours, or who's serving those healthcare heroes quality meals. This is an example of, will it replace that restaurant completely? Probably not. But are you thinking, and this is really what I want your audience to take away, crisis leadership, crisis resilience is about both having a defensive strategy, right? How can we pivot? How can we do something that we already know how to do and quickly pivot our manufacturing to create, face shields as an example.
Mm-hmm.
But how can we also create an offensive strategy that is potentially a new business model, certainly new revenue models, right? Again, take your top 10 menu items and make meal kits out of it. Take your expertise you already have, your capability with those chefs, and create a membership model, right? And who doesn't want to, parents are desperate for after school programming, right? How can I teach my kids something else that, by the way, I have a job to do, right? Can somebody virtually babysit my kids by teaching them something, right?
Yeah.
So this is an example of a restaurant taking their existing core competency and turning it into both a defensive strategy, but also an offensive one. And I think more businesses could benefit from thinking this way and really pivoting their business this way.
Yeah. I really love this. I think it's so practical. I mean, we have a lot of conversations around what things look like and what we should be doing, but I think this shows the thought process behind how do we actually have a concept that may or may not work, but at least it's an idea. At least it's something that we could do.
I love what you just said. May or may not work. Listen, there is none of us have a crystal ball, right?
Right.
Every executives I've spoken with genuinely, authentically believes there is the other side of this.
Mm-hmm.
What no one knows is when that is.
Right.
So the forward-thinking leaders that I love to get to know and meet and talk to are thinking about not just how do we navigate the storm now, but how do we start to think about and plan for and invest in our post-COVID new norm, right? What does the other side of this look like? And what did we learn from this that we can adapt and we can apply and we can really start to think differently about the other side of this pandemic?
Yeah. And that also transitions into another question that I have. So we, if you don't know much about Shadow, so we're a venture capital firm and we're focused on the built space. So we have a lot of conversations around how people are going to start thinking about restructuring the way you think about buildings and the way that people interact with them and health. What is your thought process behind how this shapes leadership in the future?
Yeah. So can I show you?
Yes, I love that.
I thought I'd show you a couple of things. So I've spoken with a couple of executives that are very specifically related to that. So are you getting boxes delivered to your home from like Amazon and other vendors, right? So
Yeah.
most of us are used to getting deliveries, but they're typically delivered at your door, right?
Right.
Have you had anybody come inside your home yet?
I have not.
Okay, why not?
The thought of it is kind of like weird.
Right? So then what happens to all those businesses that have to think of furniture delivery, think of the bug spray people, think of any kind of maintenance like HVAC, and those people, yeah, they could do some outside, but they
Right.
still have to come inside the facility, right?
Right.
Going back to what I said earlier, which is I believe our psyche is gonna be nervous about businesses that are gonna force us, physical proximity. The other thing I thought about is how about all those people that are going to need access to what I call our sacred spaces, right?
Mhm.
Our homes, believe it or not, our cars, our offices, our place of worship, any of those places, we're going to be really uncomfortable letting anybody in. So we thought through this idea of what I call delivering assurance. And this is going to tie back to your building. And the next one I'm going to show you from CIO standpoint. So if you're welcome to drop stuff off at my door all the time, but if you want to come in, you got to start by number one, protecting your own workforce. So I think going back to the building, how do we make sure people feel safe? If you're going to come into an environment, so thinking about buildings, and if you're going to come into my space, you got to start by protecting your own people. Now, you don't have to wear full hazmat suits, but you better take some clues from the healthcare industry.
Right.
And obviously masks and gloves, and you don't have to wear those booties, right, when they come into your house. And maybe now it's more of a protective gear.
Mm-hmm.
Number two, you got to dramatically elevate the disinfection of your own infrastructure. So think of your packaging, where your trucks are loaded, your loading dock, all those stuff, you got to dramatically amplify, the UV lighting and sanitation and, how well those are disinfected, right?
Mm-hmm.
Wearable technology, I think it's going to become a lot more prevalent because, again, most of us have a device. Most of us have some sort of wearable. So I think more and more apps you're going to see accelerate, both. I'm always amazed that we know as much more about our cars than we do our bodies. We have a dashboard that shows what's happening with our cars, or a mechanic plugs that computer in and can tell us what those, check engine light error code is, but we don't have anything like that for our bodies. I think this might be an impetus for that. Number four, I'm big on setting expectations. So instead of these stale surveys after the fact, what if we scheduled web meetings with people before and after? So Kyla, our delivery people are going to come. They're going to wear protective gear. Don't be afraid. They're going to be in your home for 15 minutes, and they're going to need to be able to get access to your fridge. They're going to pull your fridge out and check the back of it. And right, so give you an understanding of what they're going to do. And then, and by the way, is anybody feeling under the weather at your place? So make sure we understand what are we walking into, right?
Right.
And then afterwards, how was the experience and what worked and what didn't? And were you uncomfortable with the outfits they were wearing, right? So, could you kindly keep your kids and your dogs away? So so really setting expectations before and after the visit. And then afterwards, sharing those learnings, sharing it with our internal staff, sharing it with external. So every one of these are going to impact buildings and facilities. And I hate to say it, but that open office space WeWork thing we all used to do, I'm just not sure people are going to be excited about going back to those environments.
Yeah.
It's not just that. Think of dental offices. Again, dentistry is also pushed not elective crowns and dentures and that stuff down. Emergencies only. Your dentist will see if you have an emergency, but those elective stuff can wait. The challenge with the dental office, you go in, if you ever had your teeth cleaned, you remember all that spray stuff that goes everywhere? That's called aerosol, right? And it just goes everywhere. Well, with a pandemic, that's really dangerous, and nobody's going to want to get that stuff all over them.
Right.
So how can we reconfigure the building or reconfigure that station or reconfigure that experience so the stuff doesn't go everywhere? I think this is just going to force all of us to think very differently about our facilities and about how we get there, how we access. Like I said, nobody's going to want to touch knobs or door handles anymore. So how do we bring more sensors and motion detection into our facilities?
This was a really good visual for that. I think I was hoping to have more audience questions. Our audience is a little shy today.
Yeah, right. I don't know what's up with that. I know some of these audience members. I don't think they're shy. I don't know I don't know what's happening there, but I'd love to hear from them. And I'd love to hear from the audience in the chat section. You'll raise your hand, right? So what are you seeing? What are the questions? What are you running into? How can we address what your relationships are thinking about in terms of both the present, but also on the other side of it?
Right.
While we're doing that, do you have other questions of me, or you want me to show another one that I've talked to several CIOs, and they showed some interesting things.
It looks like someone has raised their hand, so I'm going to go ahead and it looks like Debbie. I'm going to go ahead and let you talk and ask a question.
Okay.
Let's see if I can.
Debbie, you're muted, I think. We'll wait a second for Debbie, and if not, I think Mark's got a question. Richard Brock's got a great question as well, a comment.
Hey.
Yeah.
Now I'm unmuted, it looks like.
There you are. How are you?
Good, how are you? Kind
Great,
of the
thanks.
statement is, I think it's, because this whole thing's really frustrating, especially, I think depending on the demographic and the age group that you fall in. I've been in business for a long time, so I find it really frustrating what's going on. But like what you're doing now, it's really important that we reinvent ourselves and try to be a little more open-minded instead of closed-minded. And the whole idea of a mask just really throws me over the edge. But it is really important in business that we reinvent ourselves and get a little more patient with what's going on and not block the thought process by being frustrated and mad at the situation.
You're exactly right. And you bring up an interesting point. Masks, right? I don't think, by the way, I'm from the Middle East, so this is a really scary thing for a lot of people, right? I'm not sure I want to walk around with one of those things.
Right.
So I think that's another great example. I think masks are a fantastic opportunity for innovation. I think people are going to come up with not just better material, but see-throughs. We as human beings, I want to see your face. And it's very difficult for me to see your face when we're all behind these things. By the way, have you noticed I use iPhones. Have you noticed the facial recognition doesn't work with a mask on, right? So this is an area where, and Mark is asking, how will this new environment affect innovation? I'm actually energized by it. I think it is I saw a meme. You guys are going to chuckle at this. What has contributed biggest to your innovation? CEO, CTO, or COVID-19, right? It's, I think, as I said, things that were nice to have or we'll get to someday, or they were on a shelf, all became front and center. And I think it's going to accelerate. What I hope it will accelerate is what I call a portfolio approach to business model innovation. A lot of people think when they think innovation, products and services, which is great. But I think the opportunity there is how do we pivot our business models to think differently about not just the existing customers we're engaging, but a different customer base. So I think literally every facet of our life is up for grabs in terms of thinking differently about it, starting with the masks and the suits. Nobody wants to go outside looking like a hazmat suit, right? So how do we wear things that are protective, right, but still lets us interact with people? In terms of education, in terms of our work environment. So I'm writing the next book, book number 11. It's tentatively called Curve Benders. It's at the nexus of future of work and strategic relationships. And we've identified 15 forces that we believe dramatically will impact the way we work, the way we live, the way we play, and the way we give. And I think every facet of that is going to get certainly iterated, which is doing it better, innovated, which is doing new things, and disrupted, which is doing new things that makes the old way we used to do it obsolete.
Yeah.
I just want to get my nails done.
Right? I
need a way to get that done like right now.
You got to chuckle. I was on a Zoom meeting, and this woman executive I've known for a long time has a hat on. I'm like, okay, that's kind of cool. It's trendy. What's up? She's like, I haven't had a chance to go to salon yet.
Oh yeah.
So she just
take it.
She didn't want to show that. She didn't want to show her hair. But yeah, we're gonna have to find those salon. What do those salon workers do, right? They're gonna have to find different ways to engage us, because I don't want to be around. None of us do the filing and the just.
Yeah, I had no idea I had gray hair. No idea.
Right.
Yeah.
So, but thanks for jumping in. Very cool.
Thanks.
So I think Todd, F&B will have to change the way adapting hotels across the country. Suggestions to get through the fear, real or imagined. So Todd, Marriott is one of my clients, and I spoke to a Marriott executive who, they've furloughed 90% of their headquarters staff. I talked to another hospitality executive. They've closed 20 of their, 22 hotels. So yeah, I think number one, and again, I'm a hugger. So if we're together, I would hug you. But I think travel and tourism is in trouble. It's in real trouble, and I think it's gonna last again at least 12 to 18 months. So and it's not just a vaccine. It's not just a testing. And you hit the nail on the head. It's consumer confidence. How do you create an environment where people are not just afraid of getting back on a plane and traveling? So I think it's going to be a slow crawl back. I think it's going to take a lot of education. So educating consumers, what you're doing to keep me safe. If you think about a lot of people remember 9/11. Post 9/11, we got used to TSA, right? We were all watching a movie with my kids the other night where it was a love story, and the guy runs all the way to the gate to meet her as she's coming off the plane, and my kids were like, wait, where's the TSA? Didn't they go through? And I'm like, no, we used to have this thing where we could always go to the gate. And so that's all they've known ever since they were kids. We'd gone through, right, TSA checks. I think just like post 9/11 and TSA, we're going to have to get used to on the spot temperature and health checks. I think we're going to get used to more, again, wearable technology that informs not just us, but others around us, whether we have any kind of symptoms. I think we're going to be very sensitive to cleaning, disinfecting. You might see more UV lights. And I think there's a lot of opportunities for buildings, hotels. Do I need that lobby? Maybe not like we did before. Do I need some sort of a sanitizing place as I go through? Probably.
Yeah.
Do I need to feel more confident than I've ever done before of your cleaning and your sanitation? Yeah, you better believe it. I mean, you've seen the Delta ads that they're now fogging their airplanes, even domestically, every day. God bless them. I've met some really great people there, and they're all incredibly hard workers. They're just now fighting consumer confidence. So Todd, the best way I know how to overcome fear is education. It's reinforcing. It's just like a brand. What you say is actually what you have to do. So it's really giving people that comfort level that you're on top of disinfecting. And again, just for the audience, a good friend is chief of robotic surgery at Piedmont Health System, which is the biggest health system here in Georgia. You may know, 11 hospitals. He believes we actually will peak in June. It may slow down, subside because of the heat of July and August, but get ready for round 2 in the fall and winter when it's the cold and flu season, right? And by the way, any of your relationships in healthcare will tell you all these electives that we keep pushing down, they're going to become emergencies. And at what point do all of our healthcare workers are so exhausted that becomes round 3, right? So again, I think this is here to stay. And the sooner you can pivot, you remember that maneuverability we talked about? I think the easier the rebound's going to happen. The other thing for our audience, if you can see me, a fundamental difference between a V-shaped recovery of 1 or 2 quarters and a prolonged U-shaped recovery of 1 or 2 years is going to be our creativity. How can we create value that other people are going to want, and we get this economic ecosystem, the Amazon jungle, going again? Because if it stops, we're all in trouble. I mean, it is just so interconnected.
Yeah.
I do want to highlight there are sectors that are doing really well. I've got several clients that we're doing business with right now that are in technology infrastructure. They're in remote collaboration apps. Don't chuckle. One of my clients is the second largest winemaker in the US. Their business is up 26%, right? So they're doing well. So there's sectors that are doing well. Think of consumer products. Last time I checked, my local Publix can't, pack those shelves fast enough because we're still consuming, right? So there are sectors that are doing well, and more importantly, leaders within certain companies in those sectors are also really thinking about the other side of this. Those are the people I want to work with. Those are the people that I think are going to really do well against their competitors.
Yeah. Just you saying all that reminded me of 2 points. I had a friend who said it's rumored that Delta and a lot of the other major sites, they'll be doing back to front. So logically putting people in so that you come into contact with less people.
That's correct.
That instills that confidence and less fear, and okay, I feel a little bit better about traveling.
Yep.
And I've seen a lot of cool things. My coworker forwarded me an email a while ago, and it was a wine subscription where they'll send you the bottles of wine, and then they have a live Zoom where you get on and everyone does a live tasting and they go through the notes and this. So people are thinking through different things.
Love that. So back of the plane forward, I've always thought that makes sense. And again, if you've traveled to Europe, a lot of time they have 2 different entrances. So passengers can fill in from kind of both front and the back. And I think those kinds of things make a lot of sense. And again, those will become the new norm. On the wine club or wine shipping, that's brilliant, right? Because it isn't just about the product, it's about the experience. And I think more companies can and should think about, think of all the software or the technology companies, right? You download an app, that's great. And they may have had, if they had training or they've had videos of how to do it, that's one thing. But again, how about a community? Hey, we're gonna do Zoom meetings for an hour, once a week to show you how to use this software or a subscription, right? So don't just give me the product or a service. Help me get, maximize the outcome that I get from it. And I think it will build relationships differently. I think it will build loyalty differently.
Yeah.
I think companies and brands have 2 opportunities in midst of the storm right now. The things they do is either going to enhance their credibility and reputation and brand value, or it's going to dilute it.
Yeah.
And brands are going to matter. Brands, and we're going to develop, back to Todd's question, trustworthiness with brands that we interact with to see, do they have their act together? Are they thinking about my well-being, or are they thinking about just making a quick buck?
Yeah.
And I think that's going to have a bigger and more lasting impact on all of us.
Well, thank you, David. I know we have just a couple of minutes left, but I want to make sure there's no other audience questions before we wrap up. And then if anyone is, I know sometimes it takes a minute to type or to raise your hand. Can you tell everyone kind of how to get in touch if they're interested in learning
Sure. Yeah.
services?
Yeah, easiest thing is just our website, which is just Nour Group, nourgroup.com. I'm writing in the blog on a daily basis. I have a podcast, this Curve Benders book. A lot of my contemporaries will write a book, and I've done it as well, and then get out and talk about it. I actually learn as much about my books, after they come out, because people will read them and they challenge your assumptions, or they have their own ideas and perspectives that they want to share with you. So I'm actually writing about speaking on doing executive education on a book I haven't written yet, but every conversation is making what I write richer and really creating a really different thought process around those topics. So nourgroup.com, there's a blog, there's podcast. I do probably 2-3 webinars a week on different topics. So I would encourage you to, check those out.
Awesome. So, and for everyone on, if you're looking for the recording, we'll be in touch with how you can get access to that. And I don't think there's any other questions, so I'll go ahead and wrap up here. Thank you so much, David.
My pleasure. Thank KP for me, and hope this was useful to the audience. Thanks, everybody.
All right. Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.